Geordie is both a regional nickname for a person from the larger Tyneside region of northeast England and the name of the English language dialect spoken by its inhabitants. The term is concomitant with Tyneside, South Northumberland, northern parts of County Durham and northeast of England. Depending on who is using it, the catchment area for the term Geordie can be as large as the whole of northeast England. In many respects, Geordie speech is a direct continuation and development of the language spoken by the Anglo-Saxon settlers of this region. They were mercenaries employed by the ancient Brythons to fight the Pictish invaders after the end of Roman rule in Britannia in the 5th century. The Angles, Saxons and Jutes who thus arrived became over time ascendant politically and through population transfer from tribal homelands in northern Europe culturally over the native British. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms that emerged during the Dark Ages spoke largely mutually intelligible varieties of what is now called Old English, each varying somewhat in phonology, morphology, syntax and lexicon. This linguistic conservatism can be seen today to the extent that poems by the Anglo-Saxon scholar the Venerable Bede translate more successfully into Geordie than into present-day Standard English. Thus in northern England and the Scottish borders, then dominated by the Kingdom of Northumbria, was found a distinct Northumbrian Old English dialect. Later Irish and Scottish admixture influenced the dialect. In more recent years the northeast area has seen migrants from the rest of the world as well. In recent times, Geordie has been used to refer to a supporter of Newcastle United, despite many Geordies supporting other local teams, and the Newcastle Brown Ale schooner glassware used to serve beer in the United States. Geographical coverage, when referring to the people, as opposed to the dialect, dictionary definitions of a Geordie typically refer to a native or inhabitant of Newcastle upon Tyne, England, or its environs, an area that encompasses Blyth, Ashington, North Tyneside, Newcastle, South Tyneside and Gateshead. The term itself, using Brocket, originated from all the northeast coal mines. Depending on who is using it, the catchment area for the term Geordie can be as large as the whole of northeast England or as small as the city of Newcastle upon Tyne and the metropolitan boroughs of Tyneside. People from Sunderland have been nicknamed Mackhams in recent decades. The earliest known recorded use of the term found by an Oxford English Dictionary word hunt occurred only as late as 1988. People from Middlesbrough are nicknamed Smoggers due to its industrial heritage. Just as a Cockney is often colloquially defined as someone born within the sound of the Bow Bells, the term Geordie is sometimes defined as within spitting distance of the Tyne, and thus Geordieland could be thought of as the watershed and bioregion of the River Tyne, and Geordies as its inhabitants. Etymology: a number of rival theories explain how the term came about, though all accept that it derives from a familiar diminutive form of the name George, a very common name among the pitmen in northeast England. Indeed, it was once the most popular name for eldest sons in the region. One explanation is that it was established during the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745. The Jacobites declared that the natives of Newcastle were staunch supporters of the Hanoverian kings, in particular of George II during the 1745 rebellion. This contrasted with rural Northumbria, which largely supported the Jacobite cause. If true, the term may have derived from the popular anti-Hanoverian song Camus Free France, which calls the first Hanoverian king Geordie Whelps, a play on George the Guelph. Another explanation for the name is that local miners in the northeast of England used Geordie safety lamps, designed by George Stephenson, known locally as Geordie the Engine Wright, in 1815 rather than the competing Davy lamps, designed by Humphrey Davy, used in other mining communities. Using the chronological order of two John Trotter Brocket books, Geordie was given to northeast pitmen. Later he acknowledges that the pitmen also christened their Stephenson lamp Geordie. Linguist Katie Wales also dates the term earlier than does the current Oxford English Dictionary. She observes that Geordie was a common name given to coal mine pitmen in ballads and songs of the region, noting that such usage turns up as early as 1793. It occurs in the titles of two songs by songwriter Joe Wilson, Geordie, Hoard the Ben, and Keep Your Feet Still, Geordie. Citing such examples as the song Geordie Black, written by Roland Harrison of Gateshead, She contends that, as a consequence of popular culture, the miner and the keelman had become icons of the region in the 19th century, and Geordie was a label that affectionately and proudly reflected this, replacing the earlier ballad emblem, a figure of Bob Cranky. Newcastle publisher Frank Graham's Geordie Dictionary states, "The origin of the word Geordie has been a matter of much discussion and controversy. All the explanations are fanciful and not a single piece of genuine evidence has ever been produced." In Graham's many years of research, the earliest record he found of the term's use was in 1823 by local comedian Billy Purvis. Purvis had set up a booth at the Newcastle races on the town muir. In an angry tirade against a rival showman, who had hired a young pitman called Tom Johnson to dress as a clown, Billy cried out to the clown, "Our man, we but a fuel wad he sold off his furniture and left his wife. No, you're a fair doonreet fuel, not an artificial fuel like Billy Purvis. Thou's a real Geordie. Gan man and hide thysel. Gan and get thy Pictish. Thou made her for the city, but never for the West End o' Wootton." Rough translation, "O man, who but a fool would have sold off his furniture and left his wife. Now, you're a fair downright fool, not an artificial fool like Billy Purvis. You're a real Geordie. Go on, man, and hide yourself. Go on and get your picks, axes again. You may do for the city, but never for the West End of our town." Graham is backed up historically by John Camden Houghton, who wrote in 1869, "Geordie, general term in Northumberland and Durham for a pitman, or coal miner. Origin not known. The term has been in use more than a century." Using Houghton as a chronological reference, Geordie has been documented for at least 245 years as meaning the whole of the northeast of England. Bad weather Geordie was a name applied to cockle sellers. As the season at which cockles are in greatest demand is generally the most stormy in the year September to March the sailors' wives at the seaport towns of Northumberland and Durham consider the cry of the cockle man as the harbinger of bad weather, and the sailor, when he hears the cry of cockles alive, in a dark wintry night, concludes that a storm is at hand, and breathes a prayer, backwards, for the soul of bad weather Geordie. Travel writer Scott Dobson used the term Geordieland in a 1973 guidebook to refer collectively to Northumberland and Durham. Phonology. Geordie consonants generally follow those of received pronunciation. Some phonological characteristics specific to Geordie are listed as follows. Geordie is non-rhotic, like most Anglo-English dialects. This means speakers do not pronounce unless it is followed by a vowel sound in that same phrase or prosodic unit. The rhotic sound in Geordie is pronounced as e to the first. There is some differentiation in pronunciation in the Geordie dialect based upon the speaker's sex. For example, English sound, pronounced generically in Geordie as e unregistered trademark age, may also have other, more specific pronunciations depending upon whether one is male or female. Males alone often pronounce the sound as a, for example, the word house pronounced as US. Females, on the other hand, will often pronounce this sound as ea per mil, thus, he per mil s. Appearing in an unstressed final syllable of a word is pronounced as e unregistered trademark n. Appearing at the end of a word is pronounced as a. Yod coalescence in both stressed and unstressed syllables. T-glottalization, in which is realized by e before a syllabic nasal, in absolute final position, and whenever the is intervocalic so long as the latter vowel is not stressed. Specifically in the words had, have, has and having is pronounced as e. Specifically in words with the spelling a may be pronounced as ye. Specifically at the ends of words, with the spelling ow is pronounced as a, in monosyllabic words and e unregistered trademark in polysyllabic words. In a newspaper survey, the Geordie accent was found to be the most attractive in England. Vocabulary. The Geordie dialect shares similarities with other Northern English dialects, as well as with the Scots language and Hiberno-English. In her column for the South Shields Gazette, Dorothy Samuelson Sandvida tested many samples of Geordie language usage, such as the nouns ben and clarts, the adjectives canny and clag, and the imperative verb phrase away, away is broadly comparable to the invocation come on, or the French Alice y. Examples of common use include away man, meaning come on, or hurry up, away the lads. As a term of encouragement for a sports team, for example, or away, expressing incredulity or disbelief. The literal opposite of this phrase is hard away. Although not as common as away, it is perhaps most commonly used in the phrase hard away and shite. Another word, divvy or divvy, seems to come from the co-op dividend, or from the two Davy lamps, and the later better designed Davy designed by Humphrey Davy also called the divvy. As in a northeast miner saying Mara, ye keep way from me if ye use in a divvy. It seems the word divvy then translated to daft lad lass. Perhaps coming from the fact one would be seen as foolish going down a mine with a Scotch divvy when there are safer lamps available, like the Geordie, or the Davy. The Geordie word netty, meaning a toilet and place of need and necessity for relief or bathroom, has an uncertain origin, though some have theorized that it may come from slang used by Roman soldiers on Hadrian's Wall, which may have later become gabinetti in the Romanic Italian language. However, gabinetto is the modern Italian diminutive of gabbia, which actually derives from the Latin cava, the root of the loan words that became the modern English cave, cage, and jail. Thus, another explanation would be that it comes from a modern Romanic Italian form of the word gabinetti, though only a relatively small number of Italians have migrated to the north of England, mostly during the 19th century. Some etymologists connect the word netty to the modern English word needy. John Trotter Brockett, writing in 1829 in his A Glossary of North Country Words, claims that the etymon of netty is the modern English needy and need. Bill Griffiths, in A Dictionary of Northeast Dialect, points to the earlier form, the Old English gnardi. He writes, mislocates a possible early X. Robert Hovingham Saul Make. At the other end of his house in Icton York 1419, in which case the root could be oe gnardi necessary. Another related word, nessie, is thought to derive from the modern English necessary. A poem called Yam, narrated by author Douglas Q, demonstrates the usage of a lot of Geordie words. Media. In recent times, the Geordie dialect has featured prominently in the British media, not only due to its alien dialect to much of the population but also its perceived friendly appeal. Television presenters such as Ant and Dec are now happy to use their natural accents on air. Marcus Bentley, the commentator on the UK edition of Big Brother, is often perceived by Southerners to have a Geordie dialect. However, he grew up in Stockton-on-Tees. Brendan Foster and Sid Waddle have both worked as television sports commentators. Cheryl Cole, a member of Girls Aloud and judge on The X Factor, has a Geordie accent. She says that she's proud to be Geordie. As does Joe Masaldery, the winner of the 6th series of The X Factor. In May 2011, Cheryl Cole was let go from the American version of The X Factor because its producers feared the American audience would not understand her Geordie accent. While hosting during a May 2011 taping of Britain's Got Talent, Dec Donnelly made an apparent attempt to stand up for Cole by asking co-producer and judge Simon Cowell on the show, "Can you understand my accent?" Little Mix members Perry Edwards and Jade Thirlwall are both Geordies. The song, Why I Man, is also a popular Geordie song by Mark Knopfler. The dialect was also popularised by the comic magazine Viz, where the dialect is often conveyed phonetically by unusual spellings within the comic strips. Viz magazine was founded on Tyneside by two locals, Chris Donald and his brother Simon. The Steve Coogan-helmed BBC comedy I'm Alan Partridge featured a Geordie named Michael as the primary supporting character and de facto best friend of the eponymous hero, despite Partridge's referring to Michael at one point as just the work Geordie and having great difficulty understanding what he says. The movie Goal, which stars Kuno Becker and Alessandro Nivola, prominently exposes the Newcastle Football Club, as well as exposing the Geordies and their dialect. Mike Neville and George House, presenters of the BBC local news programme Look North, in the 1960s and 1970s, not only incorporated Geordie into the show, albeit usually in comedy pieces pointing up the gulf between ordinary Geordies and officials speaking standard English, but were responsible for a series of recordings, beginning with ʻdʒɔrdi, which attempted, not always seriously, to bring the Geordie dialect to the rest of England. The creator of ʻdʒɔrdi was local humorist Scott Dobson, who wrote several booklets on the theme in the early 1970s, including History o' the Geordies, Advanced Geordie Palaver, The Geordie Joke Book and The Little Broom Book. The Jocks and the Geordies was a dandy comic strip running from 1975 to the early 1990s. In the lyrics of the song Sailing to Philadelphia by Mark Knopfler, Jeremiah Dixon describes himself as a Geordie boy. Jeremiah Dixon, surveyor of the Mason-Dixon line. Knopfler also includes a Geordie reference in the song 5:15 a.m., from the album Shangri-La. The bandit man / came up the Great North Road / up to Geordie lands / to mine the mother lode. In an earlier live album and video, Alchemy, Dire Straits Live, the band are seen in a pub. On the wall hangs a scoreboard for darts featuring Geordies, versus all others. Dorothy, real name Dorothy Samuelson Sandford, was a noted Geordie dialect writer who once wrote for the South Shields Gazette. Off Widdowsian, Pet was a popular fictional British comedy drama series about three Geordies leaving England to go and find work in Germany during the heights of unemployment in Thatcher's Britain. Finding work on a building site in Darwen Quarter-Saldorf, they lived there on site in a basic wooden hut as part of a group of 7 British migrant construction workers. The other 4 were Wayne from London, Bomber from somewhere in the West Country, Barry from the West Midlands, and Moxie from Liverpool. The 3 Geordie characters were supposed to be from Berkeley Company, Durham, Gateshead, and North Shields, and all 3 actors who played them were Geordies themselves. The Hairy Bikers Cookbook with Geordie Simon King and Dave Myers. The duo's lifestyle TV show is a mixture of cookery and travelogue. In 1974, Alan Price's Jarrow song reached number 1 in the old RNI International Service, and number 4 in the UK charts, which brought to the attention once again of the Jarrow March. The character Detective Inspector Robert Robbie Lewis in the long-running ITV series Inspector Morse is a self-described Geordie although not a professional one. His speech variety serves as a foil to Morse's pedantry and RP. The character Georgie, as portrayed by Catherine Tate in her eponymous TV show, is a Geordie, complete with a thick affected accent, and is portrayed regularly taking part in sponsored events for a northeast-based charity. The charity in question usually has a website with an outrageous domain name. For instance, the site for the charity she supports for battered husbands is www.chindbefemisis.co.uk. The sketches usually conclude with her remonstrating her co-worker Martin, sometimes by violent means, for his apparent non-support of her charitable crusades. The MTV program Geordie Shore is set in Newcastle. It is a spin-off of Jersey Shore. Richard Adams' novel The Plague Dogs features a fox who speaks Northumbrian Geordie, with a pronunciation guide and glossary. Scott Dobson provided assistance on the dialect. Actor Robson Green is a Geordie. Stand-up comic Ross Noble, a Newcastle native, has been known to make jokes about being Geordie. Capitalising on pride in speaking Geordie, a number of objects are sold that highlight Geordie speech and culture, such as a birth certificate for a genuine Geordie, coffee mugs, etc. Charlie Hunnam, who hails from Newcastle, refers to the swagger he walks with in Pacific Rim as a Geordie walk. Notes. References: Watt, Dominic. Allon, William, Tyneside English, Journal of the International Phonetic Association 33, 267 €271, doi, 10.1017 per second 00251003030013997. External links. Newcastle English, sounds familiar? Listen to examples of Geordie and other regional accents and dialects of the UK on the British Library's Sounds Familiar website. Hover and hear Geordie pronunciations, and compare side by side with other accents from the UK and around the world. The Geordie Directory. Find out about and learn the Geordie accent, how to get a Geordie accent, in which actor and voice coach Gareth Jamieson explains the essentials of the Geordie accent, a Geordie dialect song that describes a romantic encounter on the short bus journey from St James Park to the General Hospital, Mother of Me Bairns,